The gunshot echoed in Thalia Cross's memory like a metronome she could never silence. 8 years ago, her father had collapsed across a chessboard in Prague, blood pooling around ivory knights and ebony bishops, while a man in a charcoal suit walked away into the rain. She had been 18, a prodigy on the verge of her first Grandmaster title, and the world had promised her everything. Then Alessandro Cross bled out in 47 seconds, and the promises turned to ash. Tonight, November 14, 2023. The rain fell on Manhattan the same way it had fallen on Prague. Cold, relentless. The kind of rain that turned the city into an oil-slick mirror, reflecting neon and misery in equal measure. Thalia moved between tables at the Gilded Crown with the efficiency of someone who had memorized every floorboard creak, every uneven tile. Her uniform was black with gold piping designed to blend into the mahogany wainscoting and crystal chandeliers that dripped light like frozen tears. The restaurant occupied the ground floor of a pre-war building in Tribeca, the kind of place where the menu had no prices and the waitstaff had degrees they would never use. She refilled water glasses at table 12 without being asked. The couple there, hedge fund manager, art dealer, both wearing wedding rings that did not match, did not acknowledge her. Invisibility was the first skill you learned in fine dining. The second was reading power. The man at table 7 had power. He sat alone, phone face down, untouched scotch, reflecting amber light onto the white tablecloth. 58 years old, gray at the temples, Brioni suit that fit like a second skeleton. He had ordered the Dover sole and sent it back twice, not because it was poorly prepared, because he could. Evander Ashford emerged from the kitchen with the posture of a man who believed God owed him an apology. He was 42, British by accent and affectation, cruel by choice. He ran the Gilded Crown like a fiefdom, and the servers were his serfs. He snapped his fingers at Thalia as she passed. The sound cut through Coltrane drifting from hidden speakers. "Dawson Station is a disaster. Clear it before the 8 o'clock rush." Thalia glanced at the indicated section. 6 tables, 4 already occupied, all immaculate. Dawson, a Columbia literature grad working 3 jobs, had done nothing wrong. "Yes, sir." She moved to comply, but Evander's hand closed around her wrist, not hard enough to bruise, hard enough to own. "And you owe me $200. Friday. No excuses this time." The money was not a loan. It was a fine Evander had invented 3 weeks ago when Thalia had called in sick the same day Orion had spiked a fever of 103. Evander had a system manufacture infractions, levy penalties, keep the staff in perpetual debt. It was more effective than chains. Thalia pulled her wrist free without meeting his eyes. Friday. She had $127 in her account. Orion's pediatrician had sent the 5th notice about the unpaid balance. The hospital in Queens had a cardiac surgeon who could fix the congenital defect in her son's heart, but the surgery cost $47,000, and insurance covered 30% if she could prove the procedure was not elective. Apparently, keeping a 6-year-old alive was negotiable. The front door opened at 7:43. The rain came in first, carried on a gust of November wind that made the nearest candles gutter. Then the man. He was tall enough that he had to duck slightly beneath the Art Deco archway. Water streamed from a black trench coat that hung open over a suit the color of charcoal smoke. His hair was dark, slicked back from a face built from sharp angles and old violence. A scar bisected his left eyebrow, white against olive skin that had seen too much sun and not enough mercy. Thalia recognized him the way you recognize a siren with dread and certainty. Lysander Salvatore, 32 years old, born in Red Hook to a mafia family that had controlled the Brooklyn waterfront since Prohibition. His father had died when Lysander was 12, poisoned by the Castellano family during a chess tournament in Naples, a killing disguised as a heart attack until the autopsy revealed strychnine. Lysander had inherited an empire built on shipping gambling and the kind of justice that never saw a courtroom. The tabloids called him the Raven because he appeared before bad things happened, and because he wore black the way some men wore arrogance. Thalia knew him for a different reason. She had spent 8 years searching for the man in the charcoal suit who had walked away from her father's body. The security footage from Prague had been grainy, the angle poor, but the posture had been distinctive. She had cross-referenced it with newspaper photos, society pages, arrest records that had been sealed or expunged. 3 months ago she had found a match. Lysander Salvatore had been at the tournament in Prague. He had been in the room when Alessandro Cross died. Now he stood in the foyer of the Gilded Crown, dripping rainwater onto Italian marble, looking like a man who had walked through hell and left the door open behind him. Evander materialized at the host's stand with the speed of a predator scenting weakness. His smile was all veneers and venom. "I'm terribly sorry, sir, but we're fully committed this evening. Reservations are made months in advance." Lysander's gaze moved past Evander, scanning the dining room with the detachment of someone cataloging exits and threats. His eyes were gray, the color of winter seas. "I'd like a table, for one." His voice was low-textured, like gravel under silk. Brooklyn accent sanded down by expensive schools, but not erased. Evander's smile sharpened. "As I said, we're completely booked. There's a lovely bistro 3 blocks north. There's a two-top by the kitchen. Empty. That table is reserved for a very important client." Lysander looked at Evander for the first time. The temperature in the foyer dropped 5 degrees. "It's my birthday. I want a steak and a glass of scotch. I'll be gone in an hour." Something in his tone suggested this was not a request. It was a courtesy extended once that would not be repeated. Evander drew himself up to his full height, which brought him roughly to Lysander's collarbone. "Sir, we have a dress code, jacket and tie. You're dripping on my floor. I'm going to have to ask you to leave before I call security." The word security was a joke. The Gilded Crown employed 2 retired cops who spent most of their shifts smoking in the alley. But Evander wielded it like a threat anyway because humiliation was his preferred currency. Lysander's jaw tightened. For a moment Thalia thought he would do something irrevocable. His right hand flexed at his side and she saw the edges of a tattoo creeping past his cuff, something dark and ornate, the kind you got in places where anesthetic was optional. Then his shoulders dropped half an inch. Defeat or exhaustion or something worse. "Please." The word cost him. You could hear it in the way it scraped out. Evander laughed. It was a bright, cutting sound designed to carry to the nearest tables. Several diners glanced over with the lazy curiosity of people watching someone else's misfortune. "There's a diner on Canal Street. I'm sure they have birthday pie. Now leave before you ruin the ambiance more than you already have." Lysander turned toward the door. He moved slowly like a man dragging chains only he could feel. His hand reached for the brass handle. Thalia's body moved before her brain authorized it. She stepped out from behind the service station, her voice cutting through the coal train and the low murmur of wealth insulating itself from consequence. "Wait." Every head in the dining room swiveled. Evander's expression cycled through confusion, rage, and something that looked almost like fear before settling on fury. Thalia crossed the floor with her shoulders back and her chin up the way her father had taught her to approach a chessboard. Never show doubt. Doubt is blood in the water. She stopped 3 feet from Lysander and smiled the smile she reserved for the customers who left 20% and thought they were generous. "Mr. Dante, I'm so sorry I didn't recognize you with the coat. Your usual table is ready?" Lysander's gray eyes locked onto hers. Up close, they were the color of gunmetal flecked with something darker. He studied her face the way a jeweler studies a stone for flaws. Evander grabbed her arm hard enough that her fingers went numb. His breath smelled like the Lafrogue he kept in his office and thought no one noticed. "What the hell are you doing?" The words were a hiss, meant only for her. "Who is this bum?" Thalia kept her eyes on Lysander. "He's a regular Mr. Ashford, from my time at Booley. I'll seat him in my section. Table 47. Table 47 was the worst seat in the house, wedged between a decorative pillar and the swinging kitchen doors. The acoustics were terrible, and every time a server came through with a tray, a blast of heat and shouting chefs would hit you like a wave. But it was in Thalia's section, and it was unoccupied, and it was the only card she had to play. Evander's grip tightened. "We don't have a Mr. Dante in the system. You're lying to cover for— I don't want to cause trouble. Lysander's voice cut through the tension like a knife through silk. If there's no table, I'll go. He looked at Talia when he said it, and something passed between them that she could not name. Recognition, maybe, or the understanding that they were both standing in a burning building and arguing about the color of the walls. There's a table. Thalia pulled free of Evander's grip and reached for a leather-bound menu from the host stand. Her hands were steady. That was good. Hands were harder to lie with than faces. Please follow me. She walked toward table 47 without looking back. Either Lysander would follow, or he would leave, or Evander would stop her, and she would be unemployed before dessert service. The mathematics were simple and terrible. Footsteps behind her. Heavy boots on hardwood. He was following. Thalia pulled out the chair at table 47 with a flourish as if she were seating royalty instead of a soaked stranger at the worst table in Manhattan. Lysander looked at the chair, then at her, then at the kitchen doors that were already swinging open to disgorge a server carrying oysters on crushed ice. He sat down. The chair creaked under his weight. Thalia set the menu in front of him and leaned in close enough to smell rain and something else, expensive cologne cut with cordite like he had come here from somewhere bullets were more common than umbrellas. I'll bring water and bread. The ribeye is excellent tonight. Lysander looked up at her. This close she could see the network of fine scars around his knuckles, the kind you got from hitting things that hit back. His eyes were searching hers for something, and she did not know if he was finding it. Why? The question was so soft she almost missed it under the clatter of dishes and the rise and fall of wine-lubricated conversation. Because it's your birthday, and everyone deserves to eat on their birthday. Evander appeared at her elbow like a bad conscience made flesh. His face was the color of raw veal. Dawson, my office, now. Thalia straightened, squaring her shoulders the way you do before walking into an execution you cannot avoid. I'm in the middle of service. Now. The entire dining room had gone quiet. Even the couple at table 12 had stopped pretending not to exist. Talia could feel 60 pairs of eyes on her back, could feel the weight of judgment and pity and schadenfreude pressing down like a physical thing. Evander's hand closed around her upper arm, fingers digging into the muscle hard enough to leave marks. He spun her toward the back hallway, away from the tables, away from witnesses. Thalia stumbled. Her hip caught the edge of table 47, and the water glass she had just filled toppled, sending a cascade of ice water across Lysander's lap and onto the floor. The sound of shattering glass was very loud in the sudden silence. Evander's hand flew up and connected with Thalia's cheek before she could raise her arms. The slap was open-palmed but viciously placed, catching her just below the eye hard enough to snap her head sideways. She tasted copper and felt her teeth cut the inside of her cheek. She went down. Not because the force of the blow had knocked her over, but because her heel caught on the water spreading across the floor. She landed hard on her tailbone, pain radiating up her spine in a white-hot lance that stole her breath. Her name tag skittered across the floor and came to rest near the baseboard. The little gold-plated rectangle caught the light. Thalia. Server. Evander loomed over her, his face twisted into something that wanted to be righteous fury, but looked more like a child breaking a toy he could not fix. You're fired. Get your things and get out. And you can forget about working anywhere in this city again. I'll make sure every restaurateur from here to Montauk knows what you are. Talia's phone buzzed in her apron pocket. Once, twice, 3 times. The ringtone was muffled but distinct, the theme from Jurassic Park, the song Orion had chosen because he loved dinosaurs, the way only 6-year-olds can love something with ferocity and wonder, and the unshakable certainty that nothing bad could happen to anything that magnificent. She pulled out the phone with shaking hands. Orion's face filled the screen, gap-toothed smile, brown eyes bright with mischief, superhero pajamas 2 sizes too big. The caller ID read, Mrs. Murphy, babysitter. Thalia swiped to accept. Hello? Mrs. Murphy's voice was tight with worry. Thalia, honey, Orion's coughing real bad. I think maybe you should come home. Can you put him on a Russell then? Orion's voice small and congested. Mommy, when you come home. The question hit harder than Evander's slap. Talia closed her eyes and pressed the phone against her ear hard enough to hurt. "Soon, baby. Real soon. Did you take your medicine?" "It tastes yucky." "I know, but it helps you breathe, remember, like a superhero power-up." A wet cough, the kind that rattled in small chests and kept mothers awake at night counting respirations. "Okay. Love you, Mommy. Love you more than the whole universe, Ori." She ended the call and looked up. 60 pairs of eyes stared back at her, some pitying, some embarrassed, most indifferent. This was dinner theater for people who measured suffering in abstracts and left reviews on Yelp. No one moved to help her up. No one except Lysander. He had stood at some point during the chaos. Now he crossed the 3 feet between his table and where Thalia knelt on broken glass and spilled water, and he extended his hand. Thalia looked at it. The scars on his knuckles were old and raised a braille of violence. His palm was broad, calloused in strange places. A killer's hand, if the internet was right, a monster's hand. She took it. He pulled her to her feet with the kind of strength that suggested he could have lifted twice her weight without effort. His hand was warm and dry, and he did not let go immediately. "You okay?" Thalia nodded, even though her face throbbed, and her tailbone felt like someone had driven a railroad spike through it, and her career, such as it was, had just imploded in front of witnesses who would absolutely tell everyone they knew about the crazy waitress who got fired for helping a homeless guy. Lysander turned to Evander. The temperature dropped again. "She served me. That's her job." Evander's laugh was shrill. "She lied. She disrupted service. She assaulted a customer. I'm the customer, and I'm not assaulted. You're trespassing, and if you don't leave right now, I'm calling the police." Lysander reached into his soaked trench coat and pulled out a wallet. It was black leather worn at the edges, the kind of thing you carried until it fell apart. He extracted a business card and placed it on table 47 with the precision of a chess player making an opening move. "Call them. Tell them Lysander Salvatore is trespassing. See how fast they arrive." The name landed like a bomb in the middle of the dining room. Evander went white. The couple at table 12 looked at each other and stood up simultaneously, throwing cash on the table and walking out without their coats. 3 other tables followed suit. Within 30 seconds, half the room had emptied. Thalia knew the name. Everyone in New York knew the name, even if they pretended not to. Lysander Salvatore controlled more of the city than the mayor did. He owned the unions that moved freight through the ports, the construction companies that built the towers, the waste management firms that made evidence disappear. He was a ghost in expensive suits, the kind of power that did not need to announce itself because everyone already knew. And Thalia had just seated him at the worst table in the house. Evander's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. This is—" Lysander ignored him. He looked at Thalia, and his expression was unreadable. "Thank you for the table. I'd like the ribeye, rare, and scotch. Leave the bottle." Then he sat back down, dismissing Evander and the gawking diners and the entire wretched situation with the finality of a closing door. Thalia turned and walked toward the kitchen on legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. Behind her, Evander was sputtering something about management and protocol and unacceptable behavior, but the words were just noise. She pushed through the swinging doors into the kitchen's organized chaos. Line cooks shouted in Spanish and French. Pans hissed. The air was thick with garlic and thyme and the scorched metal smell of searing beef. She grabbed a bottle of Macallan from the liquor cage, poured a glass 2 fingers deep, and walked back out. Lysander accepted the scotch without comment. He drank half of it in one swallow, his throat-working eyes closed. When he opened them again, they were clearer, calmer. Thalia realized she was staring and looked away. "I'll put in your order." She fled before he could respond. The kitchen felt safer even with Marco screaming at a sous chef about overcooked salmon. She scribbled the order on a ticket and clipped it to the rail, then stood with her back against the walk-in refrigerator, letting the cold seep through her uniform. Her phone buzzed again. "A text from Mrs. Murphy. Orion's fever is 101.3. Not dropping." Thalia closed her eyes and did the math she had done 1,000 times. Urgent care, $200 without insurance. Prescription $60 if she could find a coupon. Lost wages from tonight approximately $80 in tips. Rent already 12 days late. Orion's surgery fund $127. The numbers were a noose and it tightened every time she tried to breathe. Marco rang the bell. Ribeye up, rare, don't let it die on the pass. Talia grabbed the plate. The steak was perfect charred crust blood-red center, accompanied by roasted fingerlings and broccolini glistening with brown butter. It looked like it cost more than her weekly paycheck. It probably did. She brought it to table 47. Lysander was staring at the chessboard that sat on the credenza against the wall, a decorative piece ivory and ebony mid-game. Someone had set up a classic position probably copied from a master game they did not understand. Lysander's attention was fixed on the board with an intensity that suggested he was seeing something no one else could. Talia set the plate down. "Your steak, sir." He did not look at her. "The knight's wrong. It should be on E5, not F6. This is the Sicilian defense Rotlewi variation, Prague 1907. Knight to F6 loses. Whoever set this up didn't know what they were doing." The words punched the air out of Talia's lungs. Prague, 1907. The Sicilian defense was Alessandro Cross's signature opening. Her father had written a dissertation on Rotlewi's games, had named his only daughter after one of the 9 muses because he believed chess was art made adversarial. And this man, this killer in a wet coat, knew the variation by sight. Thalia's hand moved before her brain could stop it. She reached past Lysander, picked up the errant knight, and placed it on E5. "You're right. It's Rotlewi versus Rubinstein. Knight to E5 forces the queen exchange and wins black the tempo." The silence that followed was absolute. Lysander turned to look at her, and there was something new in his eyes. Not surprise, recognition. "How do you know that—" Thalia's mouth went dry. She had not touched a chess piece in 8 years, had not spoken the language of openings and endgames and gambits since the day she stopped being Thalia Cross prodigy and became Thalia Cross orphan. But the knowledge was still there, calcified in her brain like old scar tissue. "I used to play." "Used to?" Lysander stood up, unfolding to his full height. He was taller than she had realized, and he moved with the controlled economy of someone who had been trained to hurt people efficiently. "You don't just used to know Rotlewi. That's not trivia. That's scholarship." The kitchen doors swung open. Evander stormed out, phone pressed to his ear, face the color of a heart attack. He saw Thalia standing at table 47, saw the chessboard, saw Lysander watching her like she was a puzzle he intended to solve. "Get away from him." Evander's voice cracked on the words. "You're done here, Thalia. I'm calling the police to escort you out for theft. I didn't steal anything. You stole time and resources serving an unauthorized customer. That's theft of services. I'm pressing charges." It was a bluff, probably. But Thalia's immigration paperwork was still pending. Her mother had been born in Puerto Rico, which made Thalia a citizen, but there had been clerical errors that took years to untangle, and any arrest, even a bullshit one, could derail everything. Lysander set his scotch down with a soft click of crystal on wood. "She didn't steal anything. I'm a paying customer. And I'm about to tip very generously for excellent service." He reached into his jacket. Evander flinched like he expected a gun and pulled out a money clip. It was heavy silver engraved with something in Italian that Thalia could not read from this distance. He peeled off bills without counting them and placed the stack on the table. $100 bills. A lot of them. "That's $8,000. Lysander's voice was flat transactional. Enough to cover the meal, the broken glass, and a generous tip for Ms. Cross's exceptional service. Thalia's vision grayed at the edges. $8,000. She could pay Evander, pay Mrs. Murphy, pay down the hospital, buy Orion 3 months of medicine, maybe even fix the transmission in her car so she could apply for jobs in Jersey where Evander's blacklist did not reach. Evander stared at the money like it might bite him. I can't accept cash over." "Then don't accept it. Give it to her." Lysander nodded at Thalia. "She earned it." He picked up his scotch and drained it, then stood and shrugged back into his wet trench coat. Water dripped onto the $8,000, but he did not seem to notice or care. "Happy birthday to me." He walked toward the door without looking back. His footsteps were heavy and deliberate, the sound of a man who had somewhere else to be and had already wasted too much time here. Talia grabbed the money before Evander could. She did not count it, did not thank Lysander, just clutched the bills to her chest and watched him push through the brass door and disappear into the rain. Evander's face cycled through fury, greed, and calculation in under 3 seconds. He lunged for the money. "That's restaurant property. You can't just—" Thalia stepped back out of reach. Her voice was steady, colder than she knew she could make it. "He tipped me. That makes it mine, and I quit." She turned and walked toward the kitchen, ignoring Evander's sputtered threats about lawsuits and police reports and career suicide. None of it mattered. She was already dead in the water. Might as well drown on her own terms. In the locker room, she grabbed her coat and her bag and the photo of Orion she kept taped inside her locker door. She did not say goodbye to the other servers. They would not miss her. The rain was waiting when she stepped outside. It soaked through her coat in seconds, plastered her hair to her skull, washed away the mascara she had applied that morning when she still thought today might be different. Thalia walked 3 blocks before she realized she had no destination. Home was a 4th-floor walk-up in Astoria, 40 minutes on the subway, if the trains were running on time. Mrs. Murphy would charge overtime. Orion needed medicine. The world kept spinning, indifferent to small catastrophes. She ducked into a bodega and bought a burner phone card, then stood under the awning and dialed the number on the black business card she had picked up from table 47 after Lysander left. It rang twice. A man answered, voice like gravel in a cement mixer. "Yeah. I need to speak to Lysander Salvatore." A pause. The sound of voices in the background muffled by a hand over the receiver. Then a different voice, rougher, dangerous. "Who's this?" "Thalia Cross, from the restaurant. He left me his card." Another pause, longer this time. Hold. Silence. Then footsteps, a door closing, and Lysander's voice quieter than it had been in the restaurant, but no less controlled. "Ms. Cross? Why did you give me $8,000? The question came out harsher than she intended, sharp with exhaustion and fear and the adrenaline crash that came after you burned your life to the ground and walked away from the wreckage. Lysander was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. "You helped me when you didn't have to. You lost your job because of it. 8,000 seems fair." "Nothing about tonight was fair." "No, it wasn't." Talia closed her eyes. The rain pounded the awning above her head, a drumbeat that drowned out the traffic and the sirens and the endless noise of the city eating itself. "I know who you are," she said quietly. "I know what you do." "Then you know I don't give money without expecting something back." "What do you want?" Another pause. Talia could hear him breathing on the other end of the line, could almost feel him thinking, calculating, deciding how much truth to offer a stranger who had moved a chess piece and known exactly where it belonged. "I want to meet you tomorrow, 1 o'clock, Washington Square Park, northwest corner. Come alone." "Why?" "Because you know Rotlewi, and I need someone who knows Rotlewi." The line went dead. Thalia stood in the rain for a long time, staring at the phone in her hand. $8,000 in her pocket. A job offer, maybe, from a man who probably killed people before breakfast. A son with a heart that did not work right, and a clock that ticked down with every beat. She thought about her father bleeding out on a chessboard in Prague while a man in a charcoal suit walked away. She thought about the $37 in her checking account and the eviction notice she had hidden under her mattress. She thought about Orion asking when Mommy would come home. The mathematics were simple and terrible. Thalia pocketed the phone and started walking toward the subway. Tomorrow she would go to Washington Square Park. Tomorrow she would look Lysander Salvatore in the eye and find out what a monster wanted with a waitress who used to be a chess prodigy. Tonight she just needed to get home to her son. Washington Square Park smelled like wet leaves and bad decisions. Thalia arrived at 12:45, 15 minutes early, because her father had taught her that punctuality was respect weaponized and she needed every advantage she could manufacture. The rain had stopped overnight, leaving the city scrubbed clean and gleaming under a sky the color of pewter. She had left Orion with Mrs. Murphy, who had looked at the crisp $100 bills Thalia handed her and asked no questions. The old woman had learned long ago that survival in New York meant minding your own business and cashing checks before they bounced. Thalia wore jeans and a black peacoat that had seen better winters, her hair pulled back in a ponytail that made her look younger than 26. She had debated bringing the pepper spray her mother had given her before dying of pneumonia 3 years ago, then decided that mace would not stop a bullet if Lysander Salvatore decided she knew too much about too many things. The northwest corner of the park was dominated by a statue of Garibaldi, the Italian revolutionary frozen mid-stride with a sword he would never swing. Thalia sat on a bench facing the arch and watched NYU students drift past with the aimless purpose of people whose biggest problem was choosing a major. A black SUV pulled up to the curb at exactly 1 o'clock. The windows were tinted dark enough to be illegal, and the license plate was government issue, the kind that meant someone had paid the right people to look the wrong way. The rear door opened. Lysander stepped out wearing a charcoal suit that fit like it had been constructed around his frame by craftsmen who charged in euros. No tie, white shirt open at the collar. He looked like he had slept 8 hours and woken up in a world that owed him apologies. He crossed the 20 feet between the SUV and the bench with a predator's economy of movement, then sat down beside Thalia without asking permission. Up close in daylight, the scar through his eyebrow was more pronounced. She wondered what had given it to him. A knife, probably. Something personal. "You came. You gave me $8,000. Seemed rude not to." Lysander almost smiled. It softened the hard geometry of his face for half a second before vanishing like it had never existed. "Did you count it?" "Twice. Once at home. Once this morning to make sure I hadn't dreamed it. And I paid my babysitter, bought my son's medication, and put the rest in an account I'm pretending doesn't exist in case I wake up and discover this was all a psychotic break." This time the smile lasted a full second. Lysander leaned back against the bench and looked at the arch like it held answers to questions he had not asked yet. "You know who I am." Lysander Salvatore, 32, born in Brooklyn. Father died when you were 12. Runs the Salvatore crime family, which controls shipping, construction, waste management, and approximately 40% of everything illegal between here and Philadelphia. You've been researching. I've been terrified. Lysander turned to look at her. His eyes were the same winter gray she remembered, but daylight revealed flecks of blue like ice over deep water. "If I wanted to hurt you, you'd already be hurt. I don't hurt people who help me." "What about people who don't help you?" "That's a longer conversation." A pigeon landed near their feet, pecking at a discarded pretzel with the mechanical persistence of something too stupid to know it was already dying. Lysander watched it for a moment, then spoke without looking at Thalia. "My father was murdered during a chess tournament, Naples 2011. He was playing Castellano Greco, head of the Greco family, for control of the East Coast shipping routes. Winner takes all. It's an old tradition. Sicilian families have been settling disputes over chessboards since before anyone bothered writing it down." Talia's pulse kicked up. She kept her face neutral, her breathing steady. "I thought your father had a heart attack." "That's what the coroner said. Strychnine looks like cardiac arrest if you're not testing for it. The Grecos paid to make sure no one tested for it." "Why are you telling me this?" Lysander stood up abruptly, hands in his pockets, shoulders tense beneath the expensive wool. He looked like a man preparing to jump off a building and trying to calculate the landing. "Because in 2 days I have to play Cassian Greco Castellano's grandson in a chess match for the same stakes. Winner controls the ports from Boston to Baltimore. Loser dies. And I need someone who can beat him because I can't." The confession landed like a grenade with the pin still in. Thalia processed the words, turned them over, looked for the lie underneath. Found nothing but exhaustion and something that might have been desperation if Lysander Salvatore were the kind of man who admitted to desperation. "You need a ringer." I need someone who knows Rotlewi. Someone who can see 20 moves ahead. Someone the Grecos won't recognize until it's too late. You need a ghost. Lysander's head snapped around. For the first time since she had met him, he looked genuinely surprised. You know about that? Thalia stood up, putting the bench between them like it could protect her from the weight of what she was about to admit. 8 years ago there was an anonymous grandmaster who played online under the handle Ghost Queen, won 463 matches, never lost once, then disappeared overnight and never played again. You're her. It was not a question. Thalia did not bother denying it. I was her. Past tense. I don't play anymore. Why not? Because the last time I played someone I loved died. The words came out harder than she intended, sharp enough to cut. Lysander absorbed them without flinching, like he had heard worse confessions before breakfast. Who? My father. Alessandro Cross. He was teaching at a tournament in Prague when there was a shooting. Crossfire between two families settling a territory dispute. He bled out before the ambulance arrived. Thalia watched Lysander's face, looking for the flicker of recognition, the guilty flinch, anything that would confirm what she had spent 8 years trying to prove. But his expression remained carefully blank, a mask she could not read. I'm sorry. Are you? The question hung between them like smoke. Lysander's jaw tightened, and for a moment Thalia thought he would walk away, climb back into his SUV and leave her to drown in the consequences of knowing too much. Instead, he pulled out his phone, tapped the screen twice, and handed it to her. The video was grainy shot from a security camera mounted high in a corner. The timestamp read March 7th, 2015. The location tag was in Czech, but Thalia recognized the room, the Grand Master's Hall in Prague, with its vaulted ceilings and rows of chessboards under cold fluorescent lights. The footage showed 2 men at a table in the foreground, an older man in his 50s with wire-rimmed glasses hunched over a chessboard, and a younger man in a dark suit standing behind him. The younger man was Lysander 12 years ago, all sharp angles and barely controlled fury. In the background near the rear exit, another man sat alone. Alessandro Cross. He was bent over a book, making notes in the margins, oblivious to the world. The video jumped forward. Someone had edited out the dead time, and suddenly there were 4 men in suits shoving through the emergency exit. They had guns. The sound on the video was poor, but Thalia could hear shouting in Italian, could see people scattering like birds before a storm. Alessandro looked up from his book. He stood, hands raised, backing toward the wall. One of the gunmen pointed at him, yelled something Thalia could not make out. Lysander moved. He shoved the older man. He had been standing behind his father. Thalia realized with cold certainty under the table, then sprinted toward Alessandro. He was faster than a man his size should have been, but he was crossing 30 feet of open floor, and the gunman had already made his decision. 3 shots. The sound was flat and unremarkable on the cheap speakers, like someone knocking on a door. Alessandro went down. Lysander reached him 2 seconds later, dropping to his knees, pressing his hands against the wounds in Alessandro's chest. Blood welled up between his fingers, black under the fluorescent lights. Then more gunfire, this time from the opposite direction. Lysander's men returning fire. The 4 gunmen retreated through the emergency exit. The whole thing lasted 43 seconds. The video ended with Lysander kneeling beside Alessandro's body, his white shirt soaked red, his face blank with shock. Thalia's hands were shaking when she handed the phone back. Her vision had tunneled down to a pinpoint, and she could hear her pulse hammering in her ears like artillery. He tried to tell me something. At the end. Lysander's voice was quiet, almost gentle. I couldn't hear over the alarms, but I think it was tell Thalia I'm sorry. The world tilted sideways. Thalia sat down hard on the bench before her legs could give out. 8 years. She had spent 8 years hating a man who had tried to save her father. 8 years hunting a ghost while the real killers walked free. The Grecos killed him. The Grecos killed a lot of people that day. They were sending a message: nobody challenges Castellano and lives. My father survived another 3 months before they finished the job with poison. Thalia pressed the heels of her palms against her eyes until she saw stars. The grief was old, calcified, but it still had teeth. Why show me this? Because you deserve the truth, and because I'm asking you to do something dangerous, and you should know exactly who you're working with. I'm not working with you. $50,000. Cash. Up front. Play 3 games for me. Win, and you walk away clean. Lose, and the Grecos will kill me, and you won't owe anyone anything because I'll be dead." Talia laughed. It came out bitter and jagged, the sound of something breaking that could not be fixed. "You're insane." "I'm desperate. There's a difference." "Not from where I'm sitting." Lysander crouched down so they were at eye level. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the shadow of stubble along his jaw, the way his shoulders carried tension like other men carried briefcases. "Your son needs surgery. 50,000 covers it, completely. No payment plans, no insurance denials, no waiting for approval while he gets worse." The words hit like a physical blow. Talia's breath caught in her chest. "How do you know about that?" "I know about everything. It's my job." "You had me investigated." "I had you protected. There's a difference." Talia stood up so fast the bench rocked. "Protected from what?" Lysander straightened, hands still in his pockets, face carefully neutral. "Evander Ashford filed a police report last night. Theft of services, assault, fraud. Complete bullshit, but he has friends in the DA's office. Without intervention, you'd have been arrested this morning." The air went out of Talia's lungs. "What did you do?" "I made a phone call. The report disappeared. You're clean. I don't want to owe you." "Then don't. Take the 50,000, play the games, and we're even." Talia looked at him, really looked, trying to see past the tailored suit and the controlled violence and the armor he wore against the world. She saw exhaustion. She saw the kind of loneliness that came from standing in rooms full of people and knowing none of them would bleed for you. Why chess? Why not just shoot Cassian Greco and take what you want? Lysander's smile was thin and bitter. "Because some traditions matter. Because my father believed disputes should be settled with minds, not bullets. Because the families that matter, the ones in Naples and Palermo, in places where the mob is older than countries, respect the old ways. Break the rules, and you don't just lose territory. You lose legitimacy." "So you're the honorable monster." "I'm the monster trying to be less of one. It's harder than it looks." A homeless man shuffled past, pushing a shopping cart full of cans. He did not look at them. "In New York, you learned not to see things that could get you killed." Thalia thought about Orion in the tiny apartment in Astoria, breathing through lungs that did not work right, trusting that Mommy would fix everything because Mommy always did. She thought about the surgery estimate folded in her wallet, the number so large it had stopped meaning anything except impossible. She thought about her father dying on a floor in Prague while a stranger tried to save him. 3 games. That's all. That's all. When, "Tonight you meet my mother. She has to approve you. Tomorrow we train. Day after tomorrow the match." "Your mother has to approve me for what?" Lysander looked away, and for the first time since she had met him, he seemed almost embarrassed. "You'll be living in my house. Close quarters. She's particular about who I bring home." "Living in your—" Thalia stopped, processed, recalibrated. "No, absolutely not. The Grecos will be watching me. If you're coming and going, they'll figure out what we're doing. You have to be inside the perimeter under protection 24/7. You and Orion both." The casual mention of her son's name sent ice down Thalia's spine. "You leave him out of this." "I'm trying to. But if the Grecos see me recruiting a ringer, they'll use him to get to you, to get to me. This is the only way to keep him safe." Talia wanted to argue, wanted to tell Lysander Salvatore that she would find another way, that she did not need his blood money or his protection or his dead father's legacy crushing her into compliance. But the mathematics were simple and terrible, and she had never been good at lying to herself. "One condition. If anything happens to Orion, anything, I will find a way to destroy you. I don't care how long it takes or what it costs. You understand?" Lysander met her eyes, and something passed between them that felt like respect. "I understand. And for what it's worth, if anything happens to him while he's under my protection, you won't have to destroy me. I'll do it myself." He pulled a business card from his pocket, different from the one he had left at the restaurant, heavier stock embossed with an address in Tribeca. Be there at 6. Bring Orion. Bring nothing else. Everything you need will be provided. What if your mother doesn't approve? She will. How do you know? Lysander started walking toward the SUV, then paused and looked back over his shoulder. Because you're the first person in 20 years who corrected my chess notation without being asked. My mother respects people who know things, and you Thalia Cross know more than you're willing to admit. The SUV pulled away from the curb and merged into traffic, leaving Thalia alone with a business card and a choice that was not really a choice at all. She walked back to the subway in a daze, her mind churning through possibilities and consequences. At 34th Street, she got off and walked to a public library, used one of the computers to search for everything she could find on the Greco family. Cassian Greco, 29 years old, Princeton educated, fluent in 5 languages, played chess at the international master level, not quite grandmaster, but close enough to be dangerous. His specialty was aggressive openings, sacrificing material for position, strangling opponents before they realized they were dying. The articles mentioned his grandfather Castellano, who had died 2 years ago of complications from diabetes. Natural causes, the obituary claimed, but the comments section told a different story. People who wrote in coded language about debts settled and old grudges put to rest. Thalia searched for Alessandro Cross next. The results were sparse. A obituary in the Times, a memorial page from the Chess Federation, a handful of tournament records. No mention of why he had been in Prague. No explanation for why a high school teacher from Queens had been at an international tournament where mafia families settled scores, unless he had not been a teacher at all. Thalia's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Car will pick you up at 5:30. Tribeca address attached. Bring Orion. L. She deleted the message, then immediately regretted it. The paranoia was setting in. The feeling that every security camera was watching every stranger on the subway was cataloging her movements. This was what it felt like to step into Lysander's world, the permanent weight of being hunted. Mrs. Murphy was watching Wheel of Fortune when Thalia got home. Orion was asleep on the couch, his head in the old woman's lap, breathing easier than he had in days. The new medication was working. He's been good as gold, Mrs. Murphy stood slowly, joints creaking. Took his medicine without fussing. Even ate his vegetables. Thalia handed her another $100. Can you watch him tomorrow? All day. Mrs. Murphy pocketed the money without counting it. You get a new job. Something like that. Something that pays in cash. It was not a question. Thalia did not answer. Mrs. Murphy gathered her coat and handbag, then paused at the door. My late husband, he used to say there are 2 kinds of people in this world, the ones who drown and the ones who learn to swim with sharks. You figure out which kind you are, and you act accordingly. She left before Thalia could respond. Thalia woke Orion gently, carried him to bed, even though he was getting too big for it, tucked him in with the stuffed triceratops he had named Dr. Scales. She sat beside him in the dark, listening to him breathe, counting the seconds between inhales like she had every night since the cardiologist explained what was wrong. We're going on an adventure tomorrow, Ori. He mumbled something about dinosaurs, already half asleep again. We're going to stay with a friend for a few days, in a big house. You'll have your own room. Bigger than this one, much bigger. Can Dr. Scales come? Dr. Scales can come. Orion smiled satisfied and burrowed deeper into his pillow. Within seconds, his breathing evened out into the slow rhythm of childhood sleep where monsters were imaginary and mothers could fix anything. Thalia sat with him until her legs went numb, then packed a bag with their essentials. Orion's medication, his favorite books, the photo of Alessandro that she kept in a frame beside her bed, her father smiling at a chess tournament in Moscow before Prague, before bullets, before everything fell apart. At 5:30 her phone buzzed. She looked out the window. A black town car idled at the curb, too expensive for this neighborhood, drawing stares from the bodega owner across the street. Thalia woke. Orion helped him into his coat and carried both their bags downstairs. The driver was a brick of a man in his 50s wearing a suit that barely contained shoulders built for breaking things. He opened the rear door without speaking. The interior smelled like leather and money. Orion pressed his face against the window, watching Queens blur past as they crossed the river into Manhattan. The city transformed as they drove south from worn brick and corner stores to glass towers and restaurants with names in French. The car stopped in front of a building that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought structural integrity was optional if you had enough money. All glass and steel soaring up into the November twilight like a middle finger to gravity. The driver opened the door. 62nd floor. Elevator's expecting you. Talia took Orion's hand and walked into a lobby that was more art installation than functional space. The security guard behind the desk nodded them through without asking for ID. The elevator doors opened automatically. Inside there was only one button. The ride up was silent and smooth, no sensation of movement except for the pressure change that made Orion's ears pop. He squeezed Talia's hand tighter. "Is this the friend's house?" "Yes, baby." "It's really tall." "It is." The doors opened directly into an apartment that occupied the entire floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city that made Thalia's stomach drop the harbor. The bridge's Manhattan spreading out below like a circuit board of light and ambition. Lysander stood in the center of the room, still wearing the charcoal suit from earlier. Beside him was a woman in her 60s, small and severe in a black dress that looked Milanese and expensive. Her hair was iron gray, pulled back in a bun so tight it seemed to hurt. Her eyes were dark and sharp, the kind that missed nothing and forgave less. Donna Salvatore looked at Talia like she was a problem that needed solving. "So you're the waitress who knows Rotlowy?" Talia set down their bags and stepped forward, keeping Orion behind her. "I'm Thalia Cross. This is my son, Orion." Donna's gaze flicked to the boy, softened microscopically, then hardened again when she looked back at Thalia. "My son says you can beat Cassian Greco. Your son offered me $50,000 to try. Money's cheap, results cost more." Donna walked closer, moving with the stiff precision of someone whose spine had been surgically reinforced after an accident no one talked about. "Can you beat him?" Thalia thought about the hours she had spent analyzing Cassian's games earlier, had seen the patterns in his aggression, the predictable way he sacrificed bishops for tempo, the end-game weaknesses he tried to hide with mid-game brutality. "Yes." "Confidence or arrogance?" "Math." Donna smiled. It was not a warm expression, but it was genuine. Lysander set up the board. "I want to see if she's as good as she thinks." Lysander moved to a table near the windows where a marble chessboard sat, waiting pieces arranged in starting position. He gestured for Thalia to sit. Donna took the chair opposite. Up close, Thalia could see the network of fine scars on the older woman's hands, burns maybe, or something worse. She moved the pieces with the casual authority of someone who had been playing since before Thalia was born. 10 moves. You're white. Impress me or leave." Thalia sat down. Behind her, Orion pressed against her shoulder, watching the board with the fascinated incomprehension of someone who did not yet know that games could matter more than life. She moved pawn to e4. The king's pawn game. Classic aggressive, announcing her intentions from the start. Donna responded with c5. The Sicilian defense. Alessandro's opening. Thalia's opening. The next 8 moves were a conversation in a language most people did not speak. Thalia developed her knights, controlled the center, prepared for the kind of mid-game explosion that separated amateurs from masters. Donna matched her move for move, testing, probing, looking for weaknesses. On the 10th move, Thalia castled queenside, an unusual choice that left her king exposed but opened devastating attacking lines. It was a gambit that only worked if you could calculate 15 moves ahead, and your opponent could not. Donna studied the board for 30 seconds. Then she stood up. "You'll do." She walked to Lysander, kissed him once on the cheek, then headed toward the elevator without looking back. "The guest wing is on the east side. 2 bedrooms, private bath. Don't touch anything in my studio. Dinner is at 8. Don't be late." The elevator doors closed behind her. Lysander exhaled like he had been holding his breath. That went better than expected. She didn't smile once. She smiled when you castled queenside. You just missed it. Orion tugged on Talia's sleeve. Mommy, I'm hungry. Lysander crouched down to Orion's level, moving slowly the way you approached skittish animals. What's your favorite food, Orion? The boy thought about it with the gravity of someone being asked to choose a superpower. Dinosaur chicken nuggets. I think we can arrange that. Lysander stood and gestured toward the hallway. Your rooms are this way. Get settled. We eat in 2 hours. Tomorrow morning we start training. The guest wing was larger than Thalia's entire apartment. Orion's room had a bed shaped like a race car, and a window that overlooked the city like a promise or a threat, depending on how you looked at it. Thalia unpacked their bags, set up Orion's medication schedule, tried not to think about the fact that she was living in a fortress owned by a man who killed people for a living and called it tradition. At 8 o'clock, a soft knock on the door. Lysander, now in jeans and a black sweater that made him look almost human. Dinner. They ate in the kitchen. Not the formal dining room Thalia had glimpsed through glass doors, but a smaller space with industrial appliances and a table that could seat 8, but currently held 3. Donna had made pasta carbonara from scratch, the kind with guanciale and pecorino that tasted like someone's grandmother had weaponized comfort. Orion devoured his dinosaur-shaped nuggets and fell asleep at the table. Lysander carried him to bed without being asked, moving with surprising gentleness for a man his size. When he came back, Donna was pouring wine. Tell me about your father. Talia stiffened. What do you want to know? Why you stopped playing after he died? The question was surgical, designed to cut deep. Thalia took a sip of wine, Brunello, older than she was, and tried to find words for something she had never said aloud. Because every time I looked at a chessboard, I saw him bleeding. Because the game stopped being beautiful and became the thing that killed him. Because I was 18 and stupid and thought walking away from chess meant walking away from grief. Did it work? No. Donna nodded like this confirmed something she already knew. Grief doesn't leave. It just learns to coexist. You learn to carry it or it carries you. Lysander was silent, staring into his wine glass like it held answers. Thalia stood up. I should check on Orion. Thalia, Donna's voice stopped her at the door. My husband died playing chess. Poisoned during a match he was winning. I wanted to burn every board in the house. Instead, I learned to play, became better than he ever was. You know why? Why? Because the people who killed him expected me to break, expected me to disappear. I stayed and I won, and I made them regret underestimating a widow. The older woman stood and carried her plate to the sink, moving with the stiff dignity of someone who had survived things that should have killed her. Tomorrow, you train. You learn Cassian's weaknesses. You prepare to do what my son cannot do alone. She paused at the doorway. And if you betray us, I will make you wish the Grecos had found you first. She left. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Lysander finally looked up. She likes you. That was her liking me. She didn't threaten to kill you personally. That's practically a hug. Talia laughed, despite herself, exhaustion and adrenaline and too much wine making her reckless. Your family is insane. You just figured that out. She walked back to the table and sat down across from him. Up close in softer light, Lysander looked less like a monster and more like what he was, a man in his 30s trying to survive a war he inherited at 12. Why are you really doing this, the chess match? You could walk away, disappear, leave the Grecos alone and build something new. Lysander was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was soft. Because my father believed some things mattered more than survival. Honor, tradition. The idea that we could be more than animals tearing at each other. He looked at her. I think he was wrong, but I'm not ready to prove it yet. They sat in silence, two people with dead fathers and impossible choices, drinking wine and pretending the world outside the windows was not waiting to devour them. Tomorrow, Thalia would learn to fight a war with chess pieces instead of bullets. Tonight, she just sat with a stranger who felt less strange with every passing hour, and tried to remember the last time she had felt anything other than afraid. Training began at 6 in the morning with Donna Salvatore standing over Thalia's bed like a particularly vindictive alarm clock. "You have 36 hours to become the weapon my son needs. We start now." Talia stumbled into the main room to find a chessboard already set up, coffee brewing, and Lysander nowhere in sight. Donna handed her an espresso in a cup the size of a thimble. "Drink. Then we analyze every game Cassian Greco has played in the last 5 years. You will memorize his patterns. You will learn to predict him 3 moves before he makes them. You will find the weakness he doesn't know he has." The next 12 hours dissolved into a blur of chess notation and tactical analysis. Donna had compiled a database of Cassian's tournament games, online matches, even casual games played in parks that someone had bothered to record. The woman was thorough in the way glaciers were thorough, slow, relentless, grinding everything in her path to dust. Thalia studied the patterns. Cassian favored the Roy Lopez opening aggressive and territorial. He sacrificed pawns early to control the center, then strangled opponents with superior positioning. His endgame was weaker. He got impatient, pushed for checkmate when a slower approach would guarantee victory. "He's overconfident." Talia pointed to a game from 2 years ago where Cassian had thrown away a winning position by forcing an attack that did not exist. "He sees 3 moves ahead and assumes that's enough." "And you?" Donna moved a piece on the demonstration board. "How many moves do you see?" "Depends on the position. 15, sometimes 20. "Show me." They played. Donna was ruthless, exploiting every microscopic mistake, punishing hesitation with the surgical precision of someone who had spent decades turning chess into warfare. Thalia lost the first game in 32 moves. Again. The second game lasted longer. Thalia adjusted her approach, played more defensively, waited for Donna to overextend. She lost in 47 moves. Again. The third game ended in a draw. Donna studied the final position, then swept the pieces off the board with a gesture that somehow conveyed both approval and contempt. "You'll do, but you need to be faster. Cassian will try to rush you, make you think on his tempo instead of yours. You cannot let him control the clock." They had been playing for 6 hours straight. Thalia's hands ached. Her eyes burned, but the positions were starting to speak to her again in the language she had forgotten. Orion wandered in around noon, rubbing sleep from his eyes. A woman in her 30s appeared from nowhere staff. Thalia realized the kind of people who made rich households function invisibly and offered to take him to the building's private gym, which apparently had a rock-climbing wall designed for children. Thalia hesitated. Every instinct screamed not to let her son out of sight in this place, this tower built on blood money and family grudges. Lysander emerged from wherever he had been hiding. "Teresa's been with us for 8 years. She has a daughter Orion's age. He'll be safe." Teresa smiled, warm and genuine in a way that seemed impossible in this chrome and marble fortress. Orion looked at Thalia with pleading eyes. "Go, but stay with Teresa. Don't wander off." He was gone in seconds, the promise of adventure overwhelming any 6-year-old's capacity for caution. Lysander sat down at the chessboard, studied the position Donna had left scattered across the table. "How's the training?" "Your mother is terrifying. She raised me. Imagine living with that for 18 years. Donna returned, carrying a stack of files thick enough to stop bullets. She dropped them on the table with a thud that made the chess pieces jump. "Background on everyone who will be at the match. Greco family members, neutral observers, the arbiter who will oversee the games. You need to know who's watching and why." Talia opened the first file. Photographs, biographical summaries, criminal records that had been sealed by judges who knew better than to ask questions. The Greco family tree looked like something out of a Scorsese film, 3 generations of organized crime, each branch more baroque and violent than the last. Cassian's file was thickest. Princeton summa cum laude in economics, studied game theory under a Nobel laureate, spoke Italian, French, German, Mandarin, and Russian, played chess at the international master level, 1 tier below grandmaster. His rating was 2,510. Thalia's back when she had been Ghost Queen had peaked at 2,687. Numbers that meant everything and nothing. On paper she was stronger. In practice, she had not played a serious game in 8 years, and rust killed faster than bullets in this world. He'll have seconds. Donna tapped a photograph of two men in their 20s, both handsome in the way that suggested expensive dentistry and genetic luck. Brothers, Carlo and Enzo Greco. They'll advise him between games, help him prepare. You'll have us. Lucky me. Donna's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. Sarcasm is a defense mechanism. Save it for people who aren't trying to keep you alive. Lysander stood and moved to the windows, hands in his pockets, shoulders tense beneath a gray t-shirt that had seen better days. He looked exhausted in a way that sleep would not fix. The match is tomorrow night, less than 36 hours from now. Neutral ground, the Bowery Ballroom. 3 games, classical time control. First to win 2 games takes it all. Talia processed the timeline. 24 hours to prepare for a match that would determine who controlled half the Eastern Seaboard's criminal infrastructure, and she was the secret weapon nobody saw coming. What happens if I lose? If you lose 1 game, we're tied. Everything comes down to the 3rd game. And if I lose 2? Lysander turned from the window. His face was unreadable, but something in his eyes looked like resignation. Then Cassian kills me, probably shoots me in the head right there in the ballroom. It's tradition: winner executes loser, proves dominance, discourages future challenges. Talia's coffee turned to acid in her stomach. You're betting your life on my ability to play chess. I'm betting my life on your ability to be better than anyone expects. That's different. Donna began setting up the chessboard again, each piece placed with military precision. Enough philosophy. We have work to do. They played for 6 more hours. Donna pushed Thalia through scenarios, testing her endgame technique, her ability to convert small advantages into winning positions. Lysander watched from the couch, occasionally offering observations in the flat monotone of someone who had learned chess as a survival skill rather than a passion. Around 7, Thalia's phone buzzed. A text from Teresa Orion had a blast. Rock climbing plus pizza, asleep in his room. Don't worry. The casual domesticity of it felt surreal. Her son was eating pizza and climbing walls in a penthouse owned by the Mafia while she prepared to play chess for blood money. This was not the life Alessandro had imagined when he taught her the Sicilian defense on a battered board in their Queen's apartment. Dinner was quiet. Donna had made ossobuco, the veal so tender it dissolved against the tongue. They ate in the smaller dining room with a view of the Brooklyn Bridge strung with lights like a necklace on the throat of the night. Your father was a teacher. Donna cut her veal with surgical precision. But he knew things teachers don't normally know, new people teachers don't normally meet. Talia set down her fork. What are you asking? I'm asking if you know what he really did. Before Prague. The question landed like a trap, snapping shut. Thalia looked at Lysander, who was studying his wineglass with the intensity of someone trying to read the future in Barolo. He taught chess, at a high school in Queens, that's all. He was at a tournament in Prague, attended by 5 different crime families. Teachers don't get invitations to those events. Talia's pulse kicked up. She had wondered this herself late at night when sleep would not come and the questions circled like sharks. Why Prague? Why that tournament? Why had Alessandro been there when the shooting started? I don't know. He never told me. Donna exchanged a glance with Lysander. Some silent conversation passed between them, weighted with history Thalia could not read. He was FBI. Lysander set down his glass. Deep cover. Infiltrated the chess tournament circuit to gather intelligence on family movements, money laundering through tournament prize pools, patterns of communication. The world tilted sideways. Talia gripped the edge of the table hard enough to hurt. You're lying. I have the file. Lysander pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, slid it across the table. The document was official, stamped with federal seals, marked confidential in red letters that had faded with age. Alessandro Cross, Special Agent, Federal Bureau of Investigation, assigned to Organized Crime Task Force Eastern Division. The photograph showed her father, 20 years younger, wearing a suit instead of the cardigan he had favored, looking like someone who carried secrets heavier than lesson plans. The Grecos found out. Marked him. The shooting in Prague wasn't random crossfire. It was an execution disguised as collateral damage. Talia shoved the phone back across the table before she could read more, before the words could rearrange her entire understanding of who her father had been. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because you're walking into the same room where families execute traitors. Because you deserve to know that your father died fighting them, not caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Because if something goes wrong tomorrow, you need to understand exactly what you're up against." Donna reached across the table and covered Thalia's hand with her own. The older woman's skin was papery and scarred, but her grip was iron. "Your father was brave. Stupid, but brave. He thought he could change things from the inside. Maybe he was right. Maybe that's why they killed him, because he was getting too close to something that mattered." Talia pulled her hand away and stood up fast enough that her chair scraped against marble. "I need air." She walked to the windows, pressed her forehead against the glass, felt the cold seep through skin and bone. 62 floors below the city sprawled like a circuit board of light and ambition, millions of people living and dying, and never knowing that above them chess games determined who lived and who bled. Lysander appeared beside her, keeping a careful distance. "I'm sorry. You should have learned it differently. Did you know when you showed me the video?" "I suspected. I confirmed it yesterday." "And you didn't think to mention it before I agreed to this insanity? Would it have changed your answer?" Thalia thought about Orion sleeping down the hall, thought about the $50,000 that meant surgery and survival, and a future that did not end at age 6 with a heart that gave out before it got started. "No." They stood in silence, watching the city breathe. Somewhere down there, Cassian Greco was preparing for tomorrow, studying her games. If he had managed to identify Ghost Queen, planning his opening moves, sharpening the knife he would use if he won. "He'll try to intimidate you." Lysander's reflection in the glass was pale and sharp. "Before the match, during breaks at the board, he'll make comments, try to get in your head, throw you off tempo. I've played against assholes before. Not assholes who will literally kill the person you care about if you lose. That's different." Talia turned to face him. Up close, the exhaustion carved into his face was more pronounced. He looked like someone running on fumes and willpower, the kind of tired that sleep could not cure. "Why are you doing this? Really not the honor, not the tradition, the real reason." Lysander was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was so soft she almost missed it. "Because my father died believing I would be better than him. That I would find a way to end the wars, legitimize the business, turn blood money into something clean. And I'm 32 years old, and all I've done is keep the violence going because I don't know how to stop without everyone I'm responsible for ending up dead." He looked at her, and his eyes were winter storms over deep water. "This match, if I win, I control enough territory to force the other families to negotiate. To build something that doesn't require killing someone every time there's a dispute. It's not redemption, but it's a start." Talia wanted to tell him he was delusional, that monsters did not become saints by winning chess games, that the world he wanted did not exist and never would. But standing this close to him, seeing the desperation barely contained beneath expensive clothes and careful control, she recognized something she had felt every day since Alessandro died. The desperate hope that meaning could be salvaged from meaningless violence. That loss could be transmuted into purpose. That the dead could be honored by the living choosing to be better. "If we do this, if I win these games, you follow through, you legitimize, you stop the killing. I promise. Promises from mobsters are worth less than nothing." Lysander smiled, tired and genuine. "Then consider it a promise from a man who's too exhausted to lie anymore." Thalia walked back to the guest wing, checked on Orion sleeping with Dr. Scales clutched to his chest. Then lay in bed staring at the ceiling and trying to quiet her mind enough for sleep that would not come. Around midnight she gave up and returned to the main room. The chessboard was still set up, pieces frozen mid-game. She sat down and started playing against herself, working through variations of the Sicilian defense testing lines. Cassian might try preparing responses that would punish aggression. Donna found her at 2 in the morning, still playing. Can't sleep. Can't stop thinking. The older woman sat down across from her, studied the position on the board. "Your father taught you well, but chess is only half the battle tomorrow." "What's the other half?" nerve. The ability to sit across from someone who wants you dead and smile while you dismantle them. The Grecos will try to break you before the first move. You have to be stone. I'm not stone. I'm terrified. Donna reached out and reset the pieces to starting position with quick, efficient movements. Fear is useful. Fear keeps you sharp. It's panic that kills. You feel the fear, acknowledge it, then do the work anyway. They played one game slow and methodical. Donna pointing out subtle improvements in Thalia's position. Places where she was being too cautious or too aggressive. The older woman's teaching style was brutal. She did not praise good moves, only punished bad ones. But by the end, Thalia could feel the rust breaking off her game like dead skin. You'll win. Donna stood, joints creaking. Because you have something Cassian doesn't. What's that? Something worth losing for. The older woman disappeared down the hallway, leaving Thalia alone with the chessboard and the dawning realization that in less than 18 hours she would sit across from a man who played games for territory and blood and everything. Orion's surgery, Lysander's future, her father's legacy, depended on 64 squares and 32 pieces. She finally slept around 4, dreamless and deep. Morning came too fast. Lysander woke her at 8 with coffee and a newspaper that featured a small article on page 12, Greco and Salvatore families to settle territory dispute, sources say. The article was vague, sanitized, using the kind of language that made organized crime sound like a board meeting between corporations. They're already spinning it. Lysander sat on the edge of her bed, closer than propriety suggested, exhausted enough not to care. If I lose, the narrative is that the Salvatores were weak, couldn't hold territory, deserved to be absorbed. If I win, it's restoration of natural order. And if we expose that I'm playing instead of you, then both families lose face. The match is invalidated. We're back to open warfare, and everyone bleeds. Thalia sipped her coffee. So I have to beat Cassian without anyone realizing I'm not you. The games are closed to spectators except for family and the arbiter. You'll be seated at a table with a screen between you and the audience. They'll see moves on a demonstration board, but not who's making them. That's insane. That's tradition. These matches are about the outcome, not the theater. Orion burst into the room wearing pajamas and carrying Dr. Scales, trailing Teresa, and a promise of breakfast with actual maple syrup instead of the corn syrup they could afford at home. Lysander stood quickly, giving Thalia space to be a mother instead of a chess weapon. I'll be in the office if you need anything. The car leaves at 6. Dress comfortable. It's going to be a long night. The day dissolved into strange domesticity. Thalia helped Orion with a jigsaw puzzle while half her mind ran through chess variations. She ate lunch with Donna, who insisted on teaching her a breathing technique used by Soviet grandmasters to stay calm during championships. She called the hospital in Queens and confirmed the surgery could be scheduled for next week if the deposit came through. $50,000. The number had stopped feeling real, had become an abstraction like the national debt or the distance to stars. At 4 o'clock, Thalia showered and dressed in black jeans and a gray sweater, clothing that would not restrict movement or distract. She braided her hair back tight enough to hurt, eliminating anything Cassian could use to read her emotional state. Donna appeared carrying a small wooden box. Inside was a chess piece, a queen carved from ebony worn smooth by decades of handling. This was my husband's. He carried it to every match, called it his anchor. Something to touch when the position got complicated, when doubt crept in. She pressed it into Thalia's palm. You'll bring it back to me after you win. The weight of it was surprising, heavier than modern pieces, solid in a way that suggested it had outlasted the man who carried it. Orion hugged Thalia at the door, squeezing tight enough to make breathing difficult. You're going to work, Mommy? Something like that, baby. Will you win? The question punched through her carefully constructed armor. She knelt down to his level, smoothed his hair back from his forehead. I'm going to try my hardest. And when I come back, we're going to celebrate. Teresa took his hand. We're going to build a blanket fort and watch movies about dinosaurs. Your mom will be back before you know it. The elevator ride down felt like descending into deep water. Thalia's ears popped. Her pulse hammered against her ribs. The wooden queen in her pocket felt like a talisman or a tombstone, impossible to tell which. The car was waiting, same driver as before, same black town car that cost more than a year's salary. Lysander sat in the back, wearing a suit the color of midnight, looking like he was dressed for a funeral that had not happened yet. They drove south through evening traffic, the city transitioning from commerce to nightlife restaurants, filling with people whose biggest decision was wine or cocktails. The Bowery Ballroom loomed ahead, an old concert venue repurposed for tonight's purposes, its marquee dark. Security at the door was heavy men in suits, with the kind of posture that suggested military training and flexible morality. They waved the car through to a private entrance in the alley. Inside, the venue had been transformed. The stage was bare except for a single table, 2 chairs, and a chessboard that gleamed under focused lighting. A demonstration board hung on the wall behind it, large enough for the audience to follow the action. Velvet ropes divided the space, one section for Salvatore family, one for Greco, a neutral zone for the arbiter and observers from families that had come to witness history. Cassian Greco stood near the stage, flanked by his seconds. He was taller than Thalia expected, maybe 6'2", with the kind of build that suggested rowing teams and expensive gyms. Dark hair, sharp suit, a face that belonged on magazine covers, advertising watches that cost more than cars. He looked like he had never lost anything that mattered. His eyes found Lysander, and something predatory flickered across his expression. "Salvatore, I was worried you'd chicken out." "Cassian." Lysander's voice was flat, bored. "Still compensating for Princeton with expensive suits, I see. Still pretending you're your father. He at least knew when he was beaten. Took his poison like a man." Lysander's jaw tightened. Thalia put a hand on his arm, subtle pressure that said, "Not now, not here, not when it matters." The arbiter appeared, a man in his 70s with the neutral expression of someone who had seen every variation of human depravity and stopped being impressed. He carried a leather folder containing the match rules, officiating protocols, and presumably instructions for what to do if someone decided chess was insufficient and reached for a gun. "Gentlemen and guest." He nodded at Thalia, who Cassian had not bothered to acknowledge. "The rules are classical. 90 minutes for 40 moves, then 30 minutes to finish. 3 games first to 2 wins. Loser concedes territory and accepts consequences." "Consequences." Cassian smiled. Such a polite word for execution. "The match begins in 10 minutes. Salvatore, you have white in Game 1. Greco, you'll have white in Game 2 if necessary. Game 3 alternates based on coin toss." Lysander turned to Thalia. They walked to a curtained area off-stage, out of sight from the families gathering in their designated sections. "This is it. Last chance to back out." Thalia pulled the ebony queen from her pocket, closed her fist around it. "I'm not backing out, but I need you to promise me something. Anything. If this goes wrong, if Cassian figures it out, if the families invalidate the match, you get Orion out. You protect him. Whatever happens to me, he survives." Lysander's expression was unreadable. Then he pulled her into a hug that was brief and fierce and smelled like expensive cologne over the copper tang of fear. "He survives. You both survive. I don't make promises I can't keep." They separated. Thalia walked to the stage, her footsteps loud on old wood, and sat down at the table. The chair was comfortable positioned so the audience could see the back of her head but not her face. A screen of frosted glass created a barrier, distorting features into shadows. Across from her, Cassian Greco settled into his chair with the confidence of someone who had never questioned his right to win. The arbiter placed a clock between them, ensured the pieces were positioned correctly, then stepped back. "Game 1. Begin." Thalia moved pawn to a4, the opening her father had taught her before she learned to read. Cassian responded instantly, pawn to c5, accepting her challenge with the Sicilian defense. They were speaking the same language. The question was, who would say the last word?